The antiseptic smell hit me first, as Daniel wheeled my suitcase through the automatic doors of Maplewood Care Center. My hands trembled as I gripped my purse, the leather worn smooth from 43 years of marriage, 43 years of holding on to the same man who now wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's just temporary, Grace," he said for the third time that morning, his voice hollow as we stood in the pristine lobby. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor where other families were saying their goodbyes. "Dr. Peterson thinks a few weeks here will help with your episodes." Episodes. That's what he called them now. Not the moments when I forgot where I put my keys, or when I called our daughter by her childhood nickname. Episodes made me sound broken, like a television with bad reception. The intake coordinator, a young woman with kind eyes and a clipboard, approached us with a practiced smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson? I'm Sarah, and I'll be helping you get settled today." Her voice was warm, but I caught the way she looked at me, that careful assessment healthcare workers do, cataloging my stability, my awareness. As we walked down the corridor, I noticed everything. The way Daniel's shoulders sagged, the artwork on the walls chosen to be soothing rather than stimulating, the soft background music that couldn't quite mask the sound of wheelchairs and hushed conversations. This wasn't a hotel, despite the decorator's best efforts. This was where people came to wait. My room was on the second floor, with a view of the garden. "See," Daniel said, setting my suitcase on the bed with its crisp white sheets. "It's nice. Look at that view." But his enthusiasm felt forced, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. I sat heavily in the armchair by the window, watching a cardinal build its nest in the oak tree outside. "How long did Dr. Peterson say again?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "A few weeks, maybe a month, just until we figure out the right medication balance." He knelt beside my chair, taking my hand. His wedding ring caught the light, the same ring I'd slipped onto his finger at St. Mary's Cathedral in 1981. "I'll visit every day. I promise." But promises felt fragile now, like everything else in my world that had once seemed permanent. That evening, after Daniel left with another kiss and another promise, I stood by my door listening to the sounds of this new world. Somewhere down the hall, a woman was calling for her mother. In the next room, a television played the evening news too loudly. And from the nurse's station, I heard the quiet murmur of shift change conversations. I was adjusting my pillow when I heard Daniel's voice in the hallway. He was talking to Sarah, their voices carrying through the partially open door. "She's not coming back, is she?" Sarah's voice was gentle but direct. A long pause. Then Daniel's reply, barely above a whisper. "No. I don't think she is." The words hit me like cold water. I gripped the windowsill, my knees suddenly weak. Not a trial stay. Not temporary. This was goodbye, wrapped in the comfortable lie of maybe. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the woman I used to be. Grace Thompson, who had raised 3 children, who had taught second grade for 30 years, who had made Daniel laugh until his sides hurt. But that woman felt very far away now, like someone I'd known in another lifetime. Outside my window, the cardinal finished building its nest and settled in for the night. Tomorrow, I thought, would be different. Tomorrow, I would begin to understand what my life looked like now. 3 days into my trial stay, I had learned the rhythm of Maplewood. Morning medications at 7, breakfast in the dining room at 8, activities designed to keep us engaged or at least occupied throughout the day. I'd also learned that the woman next door, Betty, had been here for 6 months waiting for her son to visit, and that the man across the hall, Robert, still asked for his wife every morning, though she'd been gone for 2 years. Daniel had kept his promise about visiting daily, but each visit grew shorter, more stilted. We'd sit in the family room, surrounded by other couples having their own careful conversations, and struggle to find words for this new reality. "The house feels strange without you," he said on Thursday afternoon, stirring sugar into his coffee with unnecessary focus. "Too quiet." I wanted to tell him that he could fix that easily, that he could take me home. Instead, I watched him avoid my eyes and realized that the quiet was probably a relief. No more wondering if I'd left the stove on. No more searching for me when I wandered into the garden at odd hours. No more explaining to friends why I sometimes forgot their names mid-conversation. "How's the therapy going?" he asked, and I could hear the hope in his voice. Dr. Martinez, the facility psychiatrist, had been adjusting my medications and working with me on what she called cognitive exercises. Memory games, word associations, puzzles designed to slow the progression of what nobody wanted to name directly. "It's fine," I said, because what else could I say? That I felt like I was fighting a war I couldn't win? That every small victory, remembering our anniversary date, recalling our daughter's middle name, felt overshadowed by larger losses? That evening, I found myself in the activity room with several other residents. Margaret, a retired librarian with fierce eyes and shaking hands, was working on a crossword puzzle. She looked up as I sat down beside her. "First month's the hardest," she said without preamble. "You're still thinking this is temporary." I glanced around, making sure the activities coordinator wasn't listening. "How long have you been here?" 14 months. My daughter brought me here after I fell and broke my hip. Said it was just until I healed up." Margaret's laugh was dry. "Hip healed fine. Turns out I was the problem." Her honesty was startling. Most of the residents here maintain the fiction that they'd be going home soon, that this was just a pause in their real lives. "Do you ever," I started, then stopped. "Do you ever get angry?" Margaret set down her pencil and really looked at me. "Honey, I was furious for the first 6 months. Mad at my body for betraying me, mad at my daughter for giving up on me, mad at myself for needing help." She picked up her pencil again. Then I realized anger was just making everything harder. For me, anyway. Later that night, I called my daughter Jessica from the phone in my room. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright with forced cheer. "Mom, how are you settling in?" "It's fine, sweetheart. The staff is very nice." I'd learned to give the answers that made everyone feel better. "I was wondering, when you think I might be able to come home?" A pause. In that silence, I heard everything I needed to know. "Well, Dad and Dr. Peterson think it's best if you focus on getting stronger first. The physical therapy there is supposed to be excellent." Physical therapy. As if my problem was muscle weakness rather than the slow unraveling of the mind that had served me for 65 years. After I hung up, I sat by my window looking out at the garden. The cardinal had laid eggs in her nest, and I watched her tend to them with fierce devotion. She hadn't chosen this tree, this location, but she was making the best of it. Maybe that's what adaptation looked like. Not acceptance, exactly, but a kind of practical grace. The recognition that fighting the current might cost more energy than learning to swim in new waters. I was still learning what that meant for someone like me. 2 weeks in, I discovered that Maplewood had its own social ecosystem, as complex as any workplace or neighborhood I'd ever known. There were the long-term residents who held unofficial authority, the newcomers still adjusting, and the staff members who became the bridges between these worlds. I'd been assigned to what they called the transitional wing residents who might still have options, whose families hadn't quite made permanent decisions yet. It was a kind of purgatory, populated by people like me who were caught between two lives. My routine had shifted without my realizing it. Morning coffee with Margaret in the solarium, afternoon walks in the garden with Robert, who had good days and difficult ones, and evening news with Betty, who provided running commentary on world events with the sharp wit of someone who'd been a political reporter for 30 years. Daniel's visits had indeed become less frequent, though he still called every evening. Our conversations had taken on a careful quality, both of us avoiding the topics that mattered most. He told me about mundane things, grocery shopping, a problem with the water heater, our neighbor's new dog. I told him about activities and meals, keeping my observations about life here to myself. But on a Wednesday afternoon, something shifted. I was in the garden with Robert, watching him tend to the vegetable plot the staff had let him plant, when I heard familiar laughter from the visiting area. Through the windows, I could see Daniel at a table with someone I didn't recognize, a woman about my age with silver hair and a blue dress. "That's Diane," Betty said, appearing beside me with her walker. "She never missed anything. She's been here twice this week. Lives in your neighborhood, apparently." My stomach dropped. "Do you know how they met at the grocery store, from what I overheard? Bonded over being widowed." Betty's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were kind. "Well, almost widowed in Daniel's case." The words hit harder than they should have. I wasn't dead, but I also wasn't really alive in the way that mattered for a marriage. I was becoming a memory, while still breathing. That evening, Daniel arrived for our usual visit with flowers. Yellow roses, my favorites. But his manner was different, distracted. Grace, I need to talk to you about something, he said as we sat in the family room. Around us, other conversations hummed quietly, but I could barely hear them over the sound of my own heartbeat. The house is getting too much for me to manage alone. And with your needs here, he paused, running his hands through hair that had gone completely gray since my diagnosis. I think we need to make some practical decisions. Practical, the word that had replaced so many others in our vocabulary. Not permanent, not heartbreaking, not the end of everything we built together. Just practical. What kind of decisions? I asked, though I already knew. The house. Maybe it's time to sell it. The doctor thinks you're doing better here, more stable, and the truth is he stopped, took a breath. The truth is, I don't know how to take care of you the way you need anymore. I looked at my hands, at the wedding ring I still wore. 43 years of shared mornings, shared dreams, shared failures and victories, now reduced to a practical decision. There's something else, he said quietly. I've been seeing someone, just as a friend for now. Diane. She understands what this is like. Her husband had Alzheimer's. Had. Past tense. Her husband had finished his journey through this particular darkness. I should have been angry. Part of me was, but a larger part felt something like relief. Daniel deserved more than watching me disappear piece by piece. He deserved morning conversations that made sense, someone who could remember why they fell in love. Are you asking for a divorce? The question came out steadier than I felt. I don't know yet. Maybe eventually. For now, I just need you to know that I'm not abandoning you. I'll still visit, still make sure you have everything you need. But I can't keep pretending that we're going to go back to the way things were. Later, alone in my room, I cried for the first time since arriving at Maplewood. Not for myself, exactly, but for the woman I'd been, the wife who could have fought for her marriage, the partner who could have demanded more time. But I also felt something unexpected, a strange kind of freedom. The performance was over. The pretense that this was temporary, that I was the same Grace who'd promised, in sickness and in health, all those years ago. Tomorrow, I would start learning who I was now. Not Daniel's wife, not Jessica's mother, not the second-grade teacher who'd shaped hundreds of young minds. Just Grace, finding her way in a world that was smaller than before but still, somehow, full of possibility. 6 weeks after my arrival, autumn had settled over Maplewood's grounds like a familiar blanket. The oak tree outside my window had turned brilliant gold, and the cardinals' babies had learned to fly. I'd learned a few things, too. I'd learned that Margaret had been a civil rights lawyer before becoming a librarian, and that her sharp wit came from decades of fighting battles most people preferred to ignore. I'd learned that Robert's bad days were when he remembered his wife was gone, and his good days were when he forgot, which wasn't the way most people would think about it, but made perfect sense once you understood. I'd learned that the night shift nurse, Patricia, had been saving money for nursing school for 3 years, and that the activities coordinator, James, played guitar in a jazz band on weekends. Maplewood wasn't just a place where people waited to die, it was a place where life continued, just in different patterns. Most importantly, I'd learned that I was still here. Still Grace. Changed, yes, but not erased. Daniel had followed through on selling the house. He brought me photos of the new owners, a young couple with twin toddlers who would fill those rooms with different laughter, different memories. Seeing the sold sign in the photo should have felt like a death, but instead it felt like completion. That chapter of my life was finished, properly concluded rather than left hanging. He'd also brought news that he and Diane were planning to travel together a cruise to Alaska they'd both always wanted to take. He told me this carefully, watching for my reaction. I think that's wonderful, I said and meant it. You should take the camera. The good one, not your phone. Alaska deserves better than phone pictures. His relief was visible. Grace, I am sorry. For all of this. For not being stronger. Stronger wouldn't have changed anything. I told him. This isn't about strength. This is about acceptance. It had taken me weeks to understand the difference. Jessica had visited the previous weekend, bringing her teenage son Tyler, who'd been avoiding me since my diagnosis. Teenagers don't know what to do with grandmothers who might not remember their names. But Tyler had surprised me by asking about my childhood, my parents, the stories I'd told him when he was little. I want to record them, he'd said, pulling out his phone. For later. In case, He'd stopped, embarrassed. In case I forget them completely, I'd finished. That's smart thinking. Let's start with the story about great-grandmother's chickens. We'd spent 2 hours recording stories, Tyler asking questions I hadn't heard in years, me surprised by how much I still remembered about the woman I'd been at his age. It wasn't preservation. Exactly, those stories would outlive my ability to tell them. But it was connection, a bridge between who I'd been and who he was becoming. The hardest conversation had been with Dr. Martinez about the future. The medications were helping, but they weren't stopping the progression. Good days and bad days would continue, with the balance gradually shifting. Eventually, I'd need more care than Maplewood's transitional wing could provide. How long? I'd asked. Everyone's different. Could be months, could be years. The important thing is making the most of a time when you're still you. Still me. As if identity was something that could be measured, quantified, lost by degrees. But I was beginning to understand that maybe identity was more fluid than I'd thought. Maybe I could be Grace with early dementia, then Grace with moderate dementia, then Grace who needs full care, and still be Grace at the core. This afternoon, I was in the activity room working on a photo album, something Dr. Martinez had suggested. Not just family photos, but pictures of moments that had mattered to me. My college graduation, the day I got my teaching certificate, the garden behind our first house, Jessica's wedding, Tyler's birth. Margaret looked over my shoulder at a photo of me and Daniel from our 25th anniversary cruise. "You look happy," she said. We were. I touched the edge of the photo. Different kind of happy than I am now, but real. What kind are you now? I considered this. Quieter, I think. Less about what might happen, more about what is happening. Betty joined us, setting down her coffee with the careful precision of someone managing arthritis. "I used to think happiness was about having all your plans work out," she said. "Took me 78 years to figure out it's more about adapting when they don't." That evening, I called Jessica to tell her about the photo album project. She was excited, offering to scan everything digitally to make copies for the whole family. "Mom," she said as we were ending the call, "I want you to know you're handling this better than I would. Better than any of us expected." "I don't know about that," I said. "I think I'm just learning that there's more than one way to be brave." As I hung up the phone, I realized that was true. I'd always thought bravery meant fighting against impossible odds, refusing to give up. But maybe sometimes bravery meant accepting what you couldn't change and finding meaning in what remained. Outside my window, the cardinal was teaching her grown babies to find food on their own. Soon they'd leave this tree, this garden, to build their own nest somewhere else. But for now, they were still here, still learning, still finding their way. Just like me. Tomorrow I would wake up in my room at Maplewood, and I would be one day further into this journey I never chose. But I would also be one day deeper into understanding that even when life becomes smaller, it doesn't have to become less meaningful. And someday, when the memories fade and the words become harder to find, maybe the kindness I was learning to show myself, the peace I was building with this changed life, would remain. Maybe that would be enough.